Epilogue, Job, redemptive remembering. The light of his face was precious to them. Job 29:24. His face is an old war map, weathered by the years, with each wrinkle telling a story. He lights his pipe as his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren gather around the man we call Grandpa Job. Please tell us your story again, Gramps, we begged. He lit his pipe, took a long draw on it, then lifted his head back and closed his eyes as if to travel back in time. He let out a great puff of smoke and said with a wiry smile, "Of course, I'll tell you my story again. Children, when I think back on my story, which took place nearly 140 years ago, it seems like yesterday. It's not painful for me to remember because it's with redeemed memories that I look back. My eyes have been opened, and it's like having a second vision with new eyes. Now I remember, as one who once said, a great shadow has departed. It is though everything sad is going to come untrue. This is the miracle of redemption I experienced, transforming all my sufferings into gold." Are you saying you can't remember the sufferings, Grandpa? No. I remember those sores and worms, but all their sting has been removed from my memory, and they have been turned into glory. There's no sting of pain, regret, shame, or bitterness. Grace has healed my memory of these things. Now I look to the good that has come out of the fire, like all of you. I was a blessed man in every way. I had a good wife, a family, friends, a business, houses, land, good health, and a wonderful relationship with God as my friend. I falsely assumed everything came to me because I worked so hard at being good. I was about to learn that God's love is greater than all his blessings, and even in the loss of everything, it didn't mean that he was mad at me. I learned the freedom that I'm just a man named Job, filled with limitations and weaknesses, but God still loves me. I lost everything in the day from hell. It seemed to make all my sacrifices and prayers in vain. It was as though a protective hedge had been lifted, opening the door for terror to come upon us as a vicious storm. It was as if in the middle of a battle, a challenge between two powers. At the time, I believed the lies that it was God I loved who was bringing all this disaster on us. I knew there was nothing to do but offer to God my naked worship. I didn't love him because of his blessings. I just loved him for him. I knew all I had lost, including my children, belonged to him. Then I was struck with afflictions and diseases of every kind. I had worms growing and the oozing sores that both burned and itched. It was like I was in a battle with someone trying to kill me. And sadly, I falsely blamed God. Mrs. Job could not take it any longer. She was dealing with unimaginable grief that only a mother who had lost a child could ever know. And we'd lost all 10. Seeing me in such pain, she gave in to the lies of Satan and begged me to just give up, curse God, and die. I knew she was speaking out of a love for me and a grief for 10 children we lost, but I had to kindly rebuke her and remind her of the character of the God that we worshiped. I made my new home on Dung Hill, the place where you take the garbage and you burn both animal and human dung, filling the place with piles of dust and ashes. After much time had passed, my best friends finally showed up to comfort me, and I was so relieved to see them. Children, the gift of good friends are one of God's best gifts to us. We all sat in silence for 7 days. During this silence, a dark cloud of despair settled in my mind, leaving me hopeless. I know now it was the sinister breath of Satan, but at the time, I was unaware of the battle I'd fallen into. I collapsed that day. With all the pain and sorrow, I began to curse the day I was born. I was in so much pain, I couldn't remember any of the good times in my life. You see, children, I believed that if you were good, God would always bless you. And if you're bad, he'd always punish you. I knew I hadn't done anything bad that deserved the punishment I was receiving. I believed the lie that my God, who I loved, had abandoned me. Now, seeing with new eyes, he was there all the time, weeping over me, enduring my pain without intervening, because he had a greater good, the end of the Lord, that he had planned for me. At times, the hardest thing love has to do is wait. Finally, my friends spoke, but their minds, unknowing to them, had been infected with Satan's accusations against me. They were angry at me for defending my integrity and believed I had sinned because I was suffering so much. They relentlessly argued with me, saying the only solution was to admit I was a sinner and return to the God I'd never left. There are certainly times when we do need to repent as the prodigal son and return to the Father. But they misapplied this to me in a very unloving and condemning way. It's never right to try to force people to want to return to God. They took the wonderful truth of God being great and made him out to be a God who's unreachable and unaffected by what we're going through. My greatest pain didn't come from the boils, but from thinking my God was hiding his face from me in anger, treating me as an enemy. My friends turned out to be miserable comforters. They never offered to pray for me or offer a sacrifice for me. They had no grace in their hearts, only a theology that they could use to control how God will treat us by our behavior, which implies that God is obligated and controlled by us. I knew I needed a priest who would put his hand on my head and the other hand on God's heart and intercede for me as I had done for all my children. I knew in my knower there was a mediator in heaven, since I had heard of the first promise of the coming Redeemer given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I had a burst of faith as if oil had been poured on the flickering flame of my faith. In a moment of light, I saw the future with Jesus standing triumphantly on the earth in the end in triumph. And I was standing by him in a new body that had risen from the ashes. I was beholding him with my own eyes. So I planted a flag of victory on Dung Hill, making the magnificent confession, I know my Redeemer lives, and I will live with him. This burst of hope raised me that day from the ashes of Dung Hill, like a phoenix who rises out of the ashes of its nest to soar again. But I shortly sank back into the ashes as my friends attacked this hope, saying I would perish forever as hopelessly as my own dung. My only hope was to find God, but he was far too far away, hiding from me. When a terrifying storm blew towards me, I was terrorized, thinking it was another angry storm, like the one that destroyed my children. I was terrified of storms, and Elihu knew it, as he exploited my fears by telling me God was going to send another storm to humble me and remind me he was out of reach. It turned out that Elihu himself was an angry storm. I sensed that this storm was different. There was a peace in the wind. The storm was filled with the same spirit that hovered over the creation and brought order out of the chaos. The Spirit had come to restore my order out of all this chaos. When I heard the voice of my God from inside, my heart melted in sweet relief. He spoke tenderly as a father to the child he loved. Somehow, God had become smaller. He came to me as a man in a way that made him approachable to me. The storm, instead of destroying me, blew away all the dust and ashes, including all those monsters of evil that had been assaulting me. The wind sent Satan away with only a mouth full of ashes, a taste of his future. The friends and onlookers were nowhere to be seen. I was alone with my God. The Father came to me, put both hands on my shoulders, looked into my eyes, his own pouring out compassion like a flood over my body, healing to all my wounds. He said in a firm but loving voice, "Job, I have some questions for you." I'd been arrogantly demanding that he would answer all my questions, but he didn't answer any of them. Instead, he asked me many questions, none of which I could answer. I found all my answers in seeing God with new eyes. He was my answer. He invited me to take a walk with him as he had done with his first two children in the Garden of Eden. We walked through the garden of the whole universe. My Creator revealed his amazing design of the universe, his almighty power to sustain it, his tender care of all creation as a mother. We laughed together at the silly ostrich, and his laughter seemed like music filling the universe. I joined in laughter. I hadn't laughed in a very long time, but he was turning my mourning into dancing. I could only fall on my face as I realized I judged him falsely in ignorance and believed Satan's lies about him. In a way, the God I thought I believed in died that day, and a new one was standing before my eyes. No longer would I live by rumors about him, placing my faith in my beliefs about God. These beliefs died in the ashes, but a new, naked faith replaced them, a faith only in God himself. I discovered a smaller God whose heart was filled with compassion, who cared for the smallest sparrow, yet nothing could stop his purposes, even the great monsters his sword would slay. After our walk, he hugged me. We wept together, tears of healing and restoration. I was home in his eternal arms. The Father called forth my friends with anger for misrepresenting him and condemning me, which was a total reversal. He flipped the tables on them. They now stood before me as their judge. God demanded they bring sacrifices to me to offer for their offenses. I knew it was critical for me to extend grace to them, not because they deserved it, but because I had been shown such grace. "No way!" cried the grandkids. "Grandpa, how could you forgive these evil men who caused you so much pain? You should have made them suffer and pay for what they did to you." No, my children. That was the purpose of the sacrifices. They took the place of these sinful men. They paid the price for their sins. This is what the Redeemer will do when he comes to be the ultimate sacrifice for all our sins. If I hadn't forgiven and prayed for them, I would have missed the double blessing of restoration. I'd received mercy, so now I was able to give it. And it was a beautiful thing to witness as we hugged each other in mercy and sweet reconciliation. It was in that moment of praying for my friends that I realized all my sores were healed. After I prayed for my friends, Christ, who is the great high priest, my Melchizedek, took me, washed away all my pain, sorrow, and a baptism of redemption that transformed all my wounds into places of healing. All my memories were cleansed, transforming them into gold that had come out of the fire. There had been so much gold of redemption that has come from my sufferings. The most precious of all are my 3 beautiful daughters, my 3 graces. Through this journey, I had become an ugly priest. I'm just a man like everyone else, flawed, broken, walking with the limp he left me with to remind me that it's not my goodness or strength. Now I know it's only by the grace that he makes me a righteous man. I was equipped to minister to others out of my scars. You've heard of the great party we had, a celebration that joined heaven. The bells were ringing in joy as the prodigal son had returned home. I received a new robe and double for all I'd lost, not as a repayment owed to me for all my unjust suffering, but as a reward for enduring in faith by his grace. Now I look at all of you as the gold that has come out of the fire. I commission you in the name of the Lord to go forth into this hurting world and be ugly priests, filled with the great compassion of our God, to minister and encourage the afflicted, the grieving, and the sufferers with the hope that our Redeemer lives.